Hi, my name is Paul Silvera. I'm a filmmaker. Portland is a great place for me, and if I had my way, I'd put up a sign that only locals could see that read, "Portland is Movie Town." Well, it is to me anyway. You see, I've met a lot of filmmakers here who've shown and taught me a lot. You could say that Portland has taught me just about everything I know about making movies. So what can I do to remedy the debt of gratitude I owe to Portland? Well, if I can't put up a sign, the least I can do is make a movie. Portland itself is a cinematic town. In my eyes, I see it in terms of wide shots and low angles. And I never would have developed such a cinematic interest if I hadn't taken Sharon Nimchek's animation classes at the Northwest Film Center. She's taught thousands of kids, I'm sure, and I don't know anybody who's had a bigger impact on Portland's reservoir of young filmmakers.
I saw Fantasia at the local movie theater. As a matter of fact, it wasn't even the local movie theater. I had to go to the town next door because it didn't come to my theater in my local town. But I saw Fantasia, and the opening sequence of the Toccata and Fugue in D minor, where they have these abstract shapes, non-representational shapes that we're just visually interpreting through movement and color, the music and movement, and I was just bowled over. I mean, it's like something clicked inside of me, and I just went, oh my gosh, this is like a moving painting. And I'd always been drawing, and art was my thing, but I was also really interested in did a lot of writing and theater and music and dance, and was having a hard time coming up with what I wanted to do with my life, as a career, because I had so many different interests. And in that one moment when I saw that, I realized that I could have it all. I learned documentary filmmaking and enjoyed that, and I still have a place in my heart for documentary. And I ran into problems with the head of the art department at Portland State that said that animation was not an art form, and he wouldn't give me any credit for my work in animation. He told me, quote, "It's a fad like basket weaving and photography." I just went around and did filmmaking classes and animation classes as an assistant, and from there I was asked to teach a class on my own, and started teaching. My very first class was at Alameda Elementary, I think, kindergarten through second grade, animation. And we animated Girl Scout cookies, we animated shells, we animated the felt pieces on the felt board. We just, it was just so much fun experimenting, and I got a big kick out of the kids, and from there I just kept teaching. It's just amazing to me, all the different types of students that I've had. I've worked with special needs students, quite a few different projects with special needs students, severely emotionally disturbed. Worked at the State Mental Hospital, at McLaren, at Hillcrest, which are all, well, a couple of those are basically juvenile prisons. And also programs working with at-risk youth and young kids that are in residential treatment facilities, and as well as talented gifted students and regular students and art students, and occasionally adult classes. I think I've worked with kids as young as 2.5. I guess the only thing I can say is to young people that are interested, or even older people that are interested. I meet a lot of parents for the students that take my classes and go, you know, I've always wanted to do animation. And I tell them about the classes at the Northwest Film Center and in animation. And I think it's really just important to just do it, you know, just to experiment with it, take a class in it, and have fun with it.
It's still a fairly small community, but it seems like most people feel at home here.
And Portland is kind of like this, you know, little kind of funky city that's, you know, I think for a long time was just kind of forgotten about and is now kind of, you know, kind of growing into itself.
I mean, it's grown so much that there are all kinds of communities within the community.
There's just like more artists here who may end up using film as their medium, but I think maybe their basis has more to do with art than it does to do with just being interested in being involved with the Hollywood machinery.
You know, I always saw myself as an artist first and foremost, and not really in the industry.
I think in general Portland is a pretty literate, film literate audience.
My audience, which is relatively broad, but the core audience I think is the group that's interested in something beyond, you know, the top 10.
Portland's a city that's at a great place right now because it's got a lot going on for its size.
Like, I think the Northwest has this great tradition of artists being very supportive of each other, and it truly exists in music and in film and all over.
That kind of community is, I think, still around in Portland, and has certainly been something that has marked, I think, this city as different from others.
I mean, just in the 4 years I've been here, you know, there's so many more, you know, distribution and screening sort of setups.
I've met a lot of filmmakers, which I had no idea were here, all making similar type experimental short films. And now I think there's a really great community here.
We're lucky, but I think really we're very lucky that we have the Northwest Film and Video Center.
The thing that really stands out is the Northwest Film Center, which has had a couple of different names over the years, I think, which is a very well-funded nonprofit arts organization, media arts organization.
Well, the Film Center was started in well, it really began its formation in about 1970. It became incorporated in 1971, and it grew out of a kind of national interest. There had been a bunch of people who had gotten together around the country to talk about the sort of explosion of personal cinema and the decentralization of media with technology changing and sort of moving out of the hands of just television stations or just Hollywood. The whole idea of developing regional film culture.
You talk about the Northwest, and really a lot came out of here. I mean, to be honest, a lot of that pioneering of clay animation really came from Vinton Studios.
You know, it's hard to believe at this point in time that clay wasn't something that was never used except as a beginning film project until Bob Gardner and Will Vinton did Closed Mondays, you know, and pushed that medium to the point of, you know, getting an Oscar, you know, and all that. Or you look at what Jim Blatchfield has done with color xerography, or Joan Gratz with the film painting, Joanna Priestley, which is using index cards.
Most of Portland's animation goes back about, 15, 20 years. And there was basically a few people that's really started what animation is here. And you can take it back to Will Vinton's, Jim Blatchfield, Joanna Priestley, and Joan Gratz.
We're now at a place where a whole lot of people actually think of being an animator as a profession, you know. And for example, you know, Will Vinton Studios over here has they've got one television series going, and then with 100 people working on it or something.
Animation community, and it keeps growing as animation keeps growing, you know. Will Vinton, I think, for PJs right now, I mean, how many people has he hired? 60, 100?
Portland always had a lot of other very talented, and still has a lot of very independent, talented people. Jim Blashfield, Shel White, plus a lot of people in the live action, like Gus Van Sant. You know. So, I think Portland is just kind of has that diversity. Will Vinton Studios merely is the biggest employer of a lot of us.
And everybody is different. There's a difference between Shel White, and there's a difference between Jim Blashfield and Will Vinton and Joan Gratz and Joanna Priestley. Everybody's got their own personality, and it shows in their films.
There's a great tradition of animation in this town, which is really outside of Portland. You know, that's what Portland's been known for, is animation and infomercials. Actually, we're the infomercial capital of the world.
Portland has a great animation community, and that's developed over the last 2 decades.
There's a lot of things kind of springing up that are more, I guess for lack of a better term, sort of underground.
Non-institutional film screenings at the Mission and Peripheral Produce, and people like Matt McCormick and Miranda July.
Well, I think that Miranda July did a really interesting kind of new circuit with what she did with kind of a video chain letter.
Big Miss Reveal, a challenge and a promise. Lady, if you make the movie, I promise you someone will see it. And at that point, the promise basically meant that the 9 other women on the compilation tape would see it. That was all I promised. And I would make these, I'd make a tape with 10 movies on it, and then I'd send it back to the 10 different filmmakers so that they could see each other's work.
I just kind of was making them by myself and not really having any place to show them in Portland until Matt McCormick and Beth Stewart both started their screenings.
But I think he's more on the edge. The work that he's interested in or that he's trying to get out to the public is challenging and exciting stuff.
The great thing about Matt's stuff is that he's, brought people here, like him bringing Animal Charm to Portland probably had this massive impact just on what art, me and my peers were making.
It's kind of a series and a forum for experimental media, whether it be film or video. Nowadays, some computer stuff. But just it's like a small film festival.
Things like that are pretty exciting to see, because that's the kind of thing I remember. I remember that stuff happening back in the mid-'80s in San Francisco, and it was quite exciting.
One of the things in the 70s, everybody was talking about all the filmmakers were talking about how the filmmakers need to get hold of the means of production so that they can be speaking with their own voices. And it took a long time to get there, but interestingly, it's happening.
Sure, it's a show, and please come check it out. But it's an interactive thing, and hopefully you'll leave with some idea, and you'll go home, and instead of turning on the TV, you'll take the camcorder out of the closet and start making your own stuff. And that's what it's all about.
How about a little
So you're going to graduate in June?
Mm-hmm.
And then what are you going to do?
Going up to Evergreen.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I mean, Olympia's got a great local culture.
I would say that we have an extraordinarily strong media scene, given the size of the community, absolutely. We also have an extraordinarily strong music and visual arts scene. And Evergreen is virtually the only film school, even though it's technically not a film school, in Washington State. So it attracts a lot of people who are interested in learning about film and video production.
For me, the Portland Olympia, of course, I have a lot of really good friends up there, so it's almost like one long town. It's shaped like a barbell, and in between there's a very boring drive.
There have always been connections between Olympia and Portland because there's a lot of transfer of people from back and forth from Olympia to Portland, it seems. There's a lot of ex-Portlanders who live here and a lot of ex-Olympians who live in Portland.
We just have this great, community, this great energy that's happening here that I think is really, it's just contagious.
There's a lot of willingness from everybody in the community to pitch in and try to help some other filmmaker get their film off the ground.
It's a hospitable environment, I think, for creative people.
It shows kind of an openness and, like I say, a kind of media literacy in town here that's exciting.
The only thing greater than being a filmmaker is being a filmmaker from the Northwest.